Hello, everyone. This is JVL here with my best friend, Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark. Happy Friday, Sarah.
What's up, my
Together
guy?
again. This is like our fourth show together this week.
I know it's good. This is how we communicate, and everybody gets to listen. You know what I was thinking about though? I was thinking about it because the humidity is doing just a real number on my hair.
Yeah,
And I was thinking about the old days when you and I would do this, especially during the pandemic, and you would be in like a tank top and just like all your skin. It would just and I would be like in my gym jams. Like I'm in my jammies. We'd be drinking coffee, and it'd be like you'd be the first person I'd see besides my family.
Your treadmill behind you, where you were like, you
right.
you had clothes hung out on the treadmill. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Nobody could see us, and so we were just for each other, that particular look. And now everybody can see us, and so it's a new day.
Well,
different times.
You get a curated version. We actually I made some friends. Hi, Katie. Made some friends, Katie and Tommy, who are couples who my wife is friends with through Twitter, and they were up here and they stopped in and had dinner with us the other night. And I took them; they're huge Bulwark fans, and I said, "Let me give you a laugh." And I took them down to my office. I said, "So it looks really professional when you're watching, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And so I opened up the door and they laughed, because what you guys can't see is that there is an invisible line basically where the camera cuts off, and everything in front of the camera is pretty nice. And everything in back of that is like empty boxes, trash, the Lego Death Star.
Yeah.
I mean, I get like, it's a hellscape in here, but it looks on camera very nice. All right, so lots of stuff. We have a whistleblower coming out of DOJ who was recently fired, telling CBS News about how lawless everything is in there right now. She was fired because she comes from the comms shop, and she did communications work on the Department of Justice's handling of January 6th, and so she was fired. Seems like a totally normal thing to do, I guess. And then we had reports today that the FBI is administering polygraph tests to employees where they're being asked if they have ever spoken ill of Kash Patel.
Oh.
What do you make of this? Is this the sort of thing that a normal free speech absolutist type regime does? Or is this, really bad?
I mean, it's the kind of stuff that a government does that was rooted explicitly in retribution, and also in self-obsession, right? All of these guys and gals, because Christy Nome, you're doing a bang-up job there, Nomi. All of these people are deeply insecure about the fact that and I think some of them should have real imposter syndrome, because none of them are qualified for the positions that they're in. And so rather than focusing on doing the job like real professionals, they're obsessed with self-perception. And so what they can't have, because they are incompetent, is people around them who will expose them for their incompetence, which is why they spend so much time on loyalty tests. And this is also, this is one of those top-down things. Donald Trump is similarly obsessed with loyalty, obsessed with people not, articulating clearly how pathetic he is at the job he's doing and how insecure he is behind the scenes. And so, like, you can see how this obsession runs through the entirety of the administration, and specifically the cabinet.
Yeah. I mean, the way I thought of this was that there are different organizational templates for how institutions run themselves, right? And so, for instance, there is a template for corporations and how corporations run themselves. There is a template for government and how government runs itself. And there is a template for organized criminal enterprises. And organized criminal enterprises are run strictly on loyalty, because of the constraints they face, where if somebody is disloyal to you, A, they might kill you, B, they might rat on you and wind up sending you to jail because you have to operate under an incredibly high trust environment within your own organization, where trust is the most important thing. That isn't how government is supposed to be run. Right, government is not government is supposed to be run the opposite, with checks and balances and independence, right, and quasi independence within certain entities, where you have like, every every government, cabinet level department has an inspector general whose job it is to sit and look over everyone else's shoulder and to rat them out. And that sort of thing is antithetical to, for instance, a mafia crime family. Donald Trump wants the government to run like a mafia crime family and not like a government. Is that unfair to say?
Which no, and I think it's completely right to say. I also think to just say it's a cover up for incompetence actually is insufficient for what they're doing, because they also, right, they just don't want eyes on them for when they do things that are illegal, extra legal, immoral, unethical, right? They don't want people out there blowing the whistle on them. And I would say, one of the real differences between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration is the amount of leaks. And like in the first administration, it was constant leaks, right? Everybody sort of wanted.
Well, Kellyanne was on her phone all the time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was,
everybody. Well, I think lots of people wanted, they used the leaks for a couple reasons. Oftentimes it was to stop Trump in advance from doing something by bringing scrutiny to it. It was also a kind of CYA, like, well, yeah, Trump is crazy.
One of the good ones.
I'm a good guy. I'm in here, right? There's a lot of that. And that's why everything was always on background. Everything was always anonymously sourced. Nobody would go on the record. And so, this point about stacking these agencies with loyalists isn't just about now. It's also about the things that they might want to do in the future that they don't want accountability for. And this is actually where your point about the government is different, because we have lots of accountability mechanisms in government. Yes. And there's a great irony to the fact that Trump and his people, these cabinet members, when they were in the off years, the 4 years, and they were going against the government all the time, right? They sort of did it under the guise of accountability, like the government's not being run properly and we got to get in there and change it. But now that they're in there, they don't want any of the scrutiny, right? And also they have this like, well, you can't, Kristi Noem doing this, you can't criticize us about our response to the flash flooding in Texas, because then how will people trust their government? And you're just like, oh, I'm sorry. Are we meant to be ceding trust in government? Because I don't remember that being a thing you guys were
You've spent the
on.
last 5 years running around claiming that a presidential election was stolen and the government was illegitimate, and now you're worried about trust? Okay, cool. It's all great. So we're going to pivot now. We're going to talk a little bit about remorse, buyer's remorse, maybe a tiny bit of buyer's remorse, because we got a new poll out on immigration, and all of a sudden, let me bring this up. Over the course of the last year, this is Gallup, the percentage of Americans who say that immigration is a good thing has jumped by like 19 points or so, 15 points. The percentage of Americans who say that immigration is a bad thing has nosedived, gone down by 13 points. So like a net 30-point swing in a year on immigration. And that's pretty crazy. Now, there's a specific question they asked about Trump's immigration policy, and he's now upside down, 35% approve, 62 disapprove. But for me, the bigger global thing is what is your view of immigration, period? And that shift is pretty wild.
This makes a lot of sense to me for a couple reasons, that you see this big shift. And I had sent JVL this sort of tweet from somebody who had pulled the same questions asked in 2024, then asked in 2025 around immigration. And there's just these massive swings. And it goes to a couple things you and I have been talking about a lot. One is, do Americans care? Do people want mass deportations? And, listening to voters all these years, like, to me, the immigration where people are on it is pretty clear, right? Where they were in 2024 was a reaction to Joe Biden's border policies, which were vaguely non-existent. And so we had lots and lots of people coming in illegally, and Donald Trump and the Republicans were making hay about this constantly, and people were frustrated with the idea that people were just coming here illegally, right? Like, there is the tolerance in America for the idea that we're just going to kind of be like, about the border. People do not want that. They want a border that is secure. On the flip side, and this is something I've heard from voters always, people think immigration is a net good in this country. And in fact, lots of people, MAGA people, they are immigrants themselves. They are people who are one generation out from immigrants, or they are married to somebody who immigrated here. And yeah, that's a real thing. And so the way in which the American public's views on a great many things is directly related to what is happening right then, right? So people are like, well, I want the border secure, but then they're like, but not like this, right? We can argue, and we, I think, would be right to do so, that voters knew exactly what they were getting with Trump's immigration policy, because literally people were holding pre-made placards distributed by Trump at the convention that said mass deportations, right? But just like the wall, and it's always meant to be, or I think the way people receive it is, we are going to be tough on immigration and people coming here illegally. And people are cool with that. Americans are good with that. What they don't want is people who've been here for 20 years rounded up and sent to countries they don't know. They don't want people obviously wrongly deported to other countries. And so I think that you're seeing a backlash to what is a wild overreach from Trump on immigration, and again, a reflection of them thinking that the majority of Americans want the kind of cruelty that Stephen Miller wants to inflict, which I have never thought is true. And so, like, there is actually quite a common sense position on immigration, which is, we're going to secure our border, and we're going to make it clear. We're going to make it so that people can come here legally. We want to make it easier for people to come here legally, because that's all American voters, the majority of them, that's what they really want. They just want a process where we know who's in the country, and that is not unreasonable, right? To have it, for people to want it to be done legally.
So it's not unreasonable, but it is ahistorical. So they are wanting something which has never existed in America. It didn't exist in the time when Chinese people were being brought in to build the railroads. It didn't exist throughout the 60s and 70s, where we wound up with a huge undocumented population that Reagan amnestied in 1986, right? It hasn't been true of immigration law at any point in the last 50 years. Like, it simply isn't easy. Like, the idea that there's a path, it is true. No. The idea that there's a legal pathway to come in, it's very hard to immigrate legally. This is what,
I mean, with temporary working visas, there's been lots of attempts to find a way to be like, okay, we're going to know who's in the country.
And they always fail. These attempts always fail, and they fail largely because the Republicans vote against them. Right? This is what all those immigration reform packages that W tried to do failed, because Ted Cruz was against it and stuff.
I mean, I think if you go back and really look through it, I think it is that both Democrats and Republicans end up being beholden to interests that are maximalist in their immigration approaches. And just like on the abortion issue, you know that there's a sort of broad middle that actually there is consensus about, which is, people think abortion should be legal. They don't think it should be legal in the third trimester unless it's, life of the mother, or, and probably even the second trimester, like people, they have this sort of consensus position of people should be allowed to do this, but like we shouldn't be, when somebody is there's a point of viability for this fetus, you shouldn't just be able to abort it. And like, that's actually a totally normal position. Just like with immigration, it's like, we want people to come here. Right. We just want them to come here legally.
I understand that, but the difference between the two issues is that abortion is largely a legal question that you can solve, and immigration is a big logistical question, right? I mean, there is this enormous border that's almost a couple thousand miles long. You do have a bunch of poor countries south of us. We do have a whole bunch of jobs. We are, we are going to be a magnet in the way that we always are. And it would be bad if we weren't a magnet, right? If we were not a magnet for immigration, right, that would mean that our economy was bad and that we had transformed and we're no longer a dynamic economy. So there's a bunch of logistical problems. And the other, I wrote yesterday about immigration stuff, and, even the immigration restrictionists. So I went and pulled up some testimony from Stephen Camarata, who's one of the super immigration hawks, right? And he was making the point that, look, the immigrants take so much more, illegal immigrants take up a lot more in social services than they pay in taxes. And that is sort of true. It's not really true. It's not a lot more. It's like 40 billion a year that they consume in services versus 30 billion a year that they pay in taxes. But even Camarata then sort of says, now, yes, it's true that they generate $320 billion a year in economic activity. You're like, oh, is that true? Yeah. And and he goes, but largely that's in the form of wages that they are paid and that, accrue to themselves. And it's like, yeah, no shit. You know what they do with those wages? They go out and they buy things, and they buy things from stores that other people have to work at. Right. And they create jobs. This is all. And the point is, even with all of the illegal immigration so is the system good? No, it's not good. Could it be good? I don't know that it can be. Frankly, I know you don't like that. You don't. I don't like that
because I don't think it's true. I think the idea of just being like there are no, because let me just give you a couple of examples. I'm not saying
we shouldn't try, but again, just let me just say that even if you accept the idea that things have been bad and broken in really deleterious ways over the last 40 years, let's just say 40 years. We'll go back to the Reagan amnesty, right? Even if you grant that, the answer is still it's been a huge net positive economically.
I agree.
Huge net positive.
You and I agree sort of fundamentally on the idea that it's funny you mentioned Reagan, because Reagan did grant amnesty and was actually quite pro immigration and pro people coming here, in part because rooted in American patriotism, I think, is the idea of this is a great place and people want to come here. And it's great that people want to come here. Because yes, we're awesome. And also we are unique in our ability to assimilate people from all over the world, especially and if people want to be Americans, that is a sense of us being because what we do here, this project is awesome and people want to come participate in it. That being said, politics, and just sorry to get a little meta here, but politics is about the allocation of resources. Right? It is about who gets what. And if you want a robust social safety net, there will always be a tension in how do we give people services that are funded by taxpayers and balance that with sort of a constant influx of new people who will then need those services. And
hard agree.
Okay, so that's just a tension that we wrestle with, that either side can sort of push and pull on. And to me, there actually are, whenever you have something that has relative consensus among voters, there should be real opportunities for policy solutions to present themselves. And I'll give you just one. And it's one of the reasons that I think we're seeing backlash against Trump. And I don't even think we've begun to see how much backlash there will be when the amount of money that ICE has is now more than, and all these new detention facilities, like that's actually not, I think, what Americans have been asking for. Some, yes, some maximalists, but broadly, no. Broadly, what people want, I think they don't know that they want this exactly, but what they want is like a legal way for people to do this and for it to be orderly. And so,
well, they're not going to get that.
If somebody wanted to, if Biden, well, I think that's wrong. Instead of giving all this money to ICE, if the election had gone the other way, what?
I said I'd bet a watch on it.
Okay,
they aren't going to get that.
Sure,
like they may want it, but that's not
under Trump.
Which is politically achievable.
But hold on a second. No, this is where, and I think that this is where Democrats realize a mistake that they made in not taking immigration seriously as a thing that they needed to tackle. But here's one policy solution that doesn't require total consensus, that could be the way that Republicans just did this, is they basically show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities, right? Mm-hmm. Their priority is this detention and mass deportation. And you see that in the budget and how they've allocated their resources. Democrats could have allocated resources to border security and a massive scaling of judges, right? What you need are lots of people to adjudicate the things, because when you get the massive backlogs, that's when people sort of disappear into the ether, because they're like, they have to wait now months and months or years to have their cases seen. That's when they sit in detention facilities. Right. And so even if we just said, what we're going to do is really scale our ability to adjudicate people's asylum claims, to know who people are, and we made it 1,000,000 times easier, that would create a much better sense of like, okay, a judge has ruled on this. This is how you avoid people being sent to CCOT and all this stuff, because people are all hanging out in these like weird limbo situations of status, right? What people need is their status to be confirmed one way or another quite quickly. And actually, technology should be an enormous help to us in this as it gets better, where we're able to verify people's identities. We're able to like verify their backgrounds quickly. And what you need though is a system that can do that. And so I think some of it is just evolving to where we are now. It's not to just look at the system and be like, it's intractably broken. It's to say, how can we innovate on this problem to actually get to a solution that most Americans are for, which is, we want people to come here, but we want them to do it legally, and we want to know who's here, and we want to have a good sense of how resources are then going to be allocated.
So we're going to move. We're going to go deep on this. Behind the paywall.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Behind the paywall. Yeah.
Let's go deep on it. I'm sorry, but this is the show that we do just for Bulwark Plus members, and we try to make almost everything we do free and available to everybody because we want it to be like that. But this is a thing that's for us. So come join.
Guys, come hang behind the paywall with us, because I also want to talk about the real buyer's remorse, not just on immigration, but across the board so I'm not doing the focus group podcast right now, but I am still doing focus groups. And we are doing a series of focus groups right now on people who are down on Trump, who disapprove of the job he's doing, but who voted for him. And there's a lot of really interesting things about that. And I want to really break down behind the paywall, why I think the Epstein stuff matters more than you think it does, why the economic picture matters more than you think it does, and why Trump is, I think, on a trajectory for a really lousy first year.
That sounds so hot.